Hey, this is Warren Redlick. This is the first in a series of videos where I take Tesla from 2022 into maybe 2025, projecting what Tesla's revenue will be based on how many batteries will be produced that they will be able to use. In Battery Day, Elon and Drew Baglino talked about achieving a 100 gigawatt hour production of the high nickel batteries in 2022.
This is just talking about Tesla internal cell production. We will continue to use our cell suppliers, Panasonic and LG and CATL. So this is 100 gigawatt hours supplemental to what we buy from suppliers. This does reduce our weighted average cost of a cell because, it allows us to make a lot more cars and a lot more stationary storage.
I'm going to work from there in this video. I'm going to say, let's assume they produce 100 gigawatt hours of the high nickel batteries in 2022. And then I make an assumption, and this is a big assumption, but I think it's reasonable, that the other battery suppliers, CATL, LG Chem, and Panasonic, together will supply Tesla with another 100 gigawatt hours of batteries. That would be a total of 200 gigawatt hours of batteries. And I put together some spreadsheets, which you can see in the description below. And I'm going to tweak some numbers and see if the batteries go here, if the batteries go there, what's the revenue for Tesla in 2022. It doesn't make a big difference, but you can see the shift if we do more vehicles versus we do more grid storage, if you shift to semi versus if you shift to Model Y or Model S, you can see some fluctuation in how that affects Tesla's total revenue for the year. And knowing the total revenue for the year, we can project ahead, okay, what is the share price likely to look like if Tesla achieves that revenue? For context, Tesla's revenue for 2019, 2020 is in the ballpark of $25 billion. And this should not surprise you if Tesla rises up and uses 200 gigawatt hours of batteries. The number for 2022 is much bigger. Even at the low end of my models, the number is much bigger. Are you ready to talk about what Tesla is going to look like in 2022? Are you ready? Let's go!
Oh my God! Woo!
So the approach I took was to look at all the different major products that Tesla sells and the different sources of revenue. And I listed them. So we've got Semi, we've got Model 3, we've got Model Y, we've got Model S, we've got Model X, we've got Cybertruck, which is coming out in 2021, so that'll be available in 2022. We've got Roadster, we've got Powerwall, PowerPack, and Megapack. We have Solar, and then we have Other. And for each one of these, I figured, okay, we know roughly how many kilowatt hours each unit uses. We know that the average Model 3 uses somewhere between 54 and 75 kilowatt hour packs. So just to be safe, I estimated that at 60. Model Y is more likely to use a larger pack, so I estimated at 65 kilowatt hours per Model Y. And I just picked numbers. For Semi, I'm projecting, in the first model at least, that the initial year of production, they will only sell the long-range version that has the 500-mile range and the 1,000 kilowatt hour or 1 megawatt hour pack. And you can see different choices that I made. I'm projecting Model S and Model X to have an average kilowatt hours of 110 because they may be shifting to the high nickel packs, and some of them will have high nickel packs that will push their kilowatt hours up. From that analysis, I'm able to determine, okay, what's the total number of gigawatt hours used by that line item, whether it's Model 3, Model Y, etc. At the same time, I looked at the average price per unit. So we know Tesla Semi, the 500-mile range version, is supposed to be priced at $180,000. I put that down as $180,000. Model 3, it's probably more than this, and I tried to be conservative. I said, let's assume Model 3's average selling price is $40,000. Keep in mind, we're not just talking about the US, we're talking about China, we're talking about Europe. For Model Y, I figured $45,000. For Cybertruck, I figured $55,000, which is $5,000 more than dual motor. I think that's a good ballpark estimate. Model S, I projected $80,000. Model X, I projected $85,000. You get the idea. For Roadster, I projected $210,000. For Powerwall, I projected $5,000. The current price is $6,000, but I think that price is likely to drop. For PowerPack, I projected an average price of $100,000. For most of my analysis, I'm going to take PowerPack out. Elon seemed to indicate in a recent article that power pack may be going away, that they're shifting to mega pack for most uses. And for solar, I ballparked it at $40,000 a home. A wild guess. I'm not really sure. I should note that I tied Powerwall to solar. If there's one home installed, I figured the average home is going to have 4 Powerwalls. That's not really accurate. It's probably more like 3, but then some people are buying Powerwalls without solar. With the gigawatts in that column, I'm able to adjust the numbers and come up with, okay, here's a package, here's a set distribution that would lead to 200 gigawatt hours. With all those numbers put together, we can see revenue for each line. I added a line for other revenue, which would be Tesla insurance, software, service revenue. I ballparked it at $5 billion. I believe in 2020 it's going to be about $3 billion, figuring it's going to grow in 2022. But this is not a big driver of the total number. I just put $5 billion down to be in the ballpark. One of the interesting things I looked at is, what is the revenue per kilowatt hour of each line item, of each thing that Tesla sells? So Roadster, being a very, very high-priced item with a relatively small pack compared to Semi, that has a very high revenue per kilowatt hour. It's a very small item. We don't expect Roadster to sell in substantial volume. It's not going to move the needle on anything Tesla does. But you can see that the revenue for Roadster works out to $1,400 per kilowatt hour. And then the regular vehicles, the Model 3, the Model Y, the Model 3, the Model Y, the Cybertruck, they're about $700 a kilowatt hour in terms of the revenue that they generate. This is just a useful way to think about it. I'm not saying that things should be measured in dollars per kilowatt hour, but it is an interesting way to look at it. If Tesla is battery constrained, which they are, then dollars per kilowatt hour is important because it determines which products are going to generate the most revenue for the company based on the amount of batteries produced. So with Tesla Semi, even though it's a $180,000 vehicle in the 500-mile range version, it has a 1 megawatt hour pack, 1,000 kilowatt hours. And that pushes its revenue per kilowatt hour down to $180 per kilowatt hour, well below the revenue for the other vehicles on a per kilowatt hour basis. Tesla Semi might not be the best choice for Tesla in terms of overall revenue, but it's something that Elon Musk wants to pursue, and it's important in accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. And maybe Tesla has some other way they're going to generate revenue on top of Tesla Semi that we haven't thought of, or that I haven't thought of. Similarly, Powerwall and Megapack and PowerPack, they don't generate a lot of revenue per kilowatt hour. So I'm going to take you through 6 models. The first model is the one with roughly the lowest total revenue. It's biased more towards energy storage and more Semi. In all of these models, the total is to about 200 gigawatt hours of batteries used. In this first model, I imagine 25,000 Tesla Semi being produced. Maybe it's going to be more than that, but this is really going to be the first full year of production. I think it's unlikely they'll be able to scale up beyond 25,000, so it's a good start. I project Model 3 at 750,000 units, Model Y at 900,000 units. These are ballpark numbers. I'm just doing the best I can. We know that Berlin and Austin gigafactories are going to start with Model Y production. So it's reasonable to expect Model Y production to surpass Model 3 production in 2022. In this model, I projected 160,000 Cybertrucks. That's going to be the first full year of Cybertruck production. I went with 40,000 each of Model S and Model X, which is in the ballpark of current 2020, 2019 production of the Model S and the Model X. I went with 5,000 units for Roadster. I'm not even sure they're going to have Roadster ready in 2022. The small volume items are not driving revenue. They're not a huge impact one way or the other. For Powerwall and solar, I figured let's suppose solar's installed on 200,000 homes and there's 800,000 Powerwalls sold at $5,000 a piece, each using ballpark of 15 kilowatt hours. In this first model, I figured 30,000 power packs. They use about 250 kilowatt hours each, and they cost about $100,000 each. And then I'm basically winging it. I said 10,000 megapacks. They're 3 megawatt hours each. That would be 30 gigawatt hours for megapack. That might be low. It depends on how big Tesla does, but I'm just picking numbers to try to see where this is going. One important distinction to make here, I'm not breaking this down by high nickel, nickel manganese, and lithium iron phosphate. It seems reasonable from everything we know that Megapack, PowerPack, and Powerwall will be lithium iron phosphate. Some of the vehicles will be lithium iron phosphate. Some of the vehicles will be high nickel, like Semi will be high nickel. But I didn't get into that breakdown in this analysis. I'm just looking at, okay, figure 200 gigawatt hours. Let's see what it works out to. So in this model, the Model 3 and Model Y are the big consumers of batteries. Between the two of them, they're over 100 gigawatt hours of the 200 gigawatt hour total. And this seems reasonable. They're scaling up. That's something that they've been focusing on. It's not clear when Tesla's going to be able to scale up grid storage. It's not clear when they're going to be able to scale up Semi. But just there with those two, we're at 103, or about 103 or 104 gigawatt hours. Tesla Semi, if they produce 25,000 of them with a megawatt hour pack each, that's 25 gigawatt hours. Cybertruck with a fairly low volume of production is only about 12 gigawatt hours. Model S and Model X and Roadster are all low volume vehicles. Together, they're only 10 gigawatt hours. They're under 10 gigawatt hours with all three of them. Powerwall's 12 gigawatt hours, Megapack's 30 gigawatt hours in this model, and PowerPack is about 7.5 gigawatt hours. So total grid storage is in the ballpark of 50 gigawatt hours in this model. And that brings us to a total of, in this case, 200.35 gigawatt hours, close enough. The total number of cars works out to 1.9 million. I think this is an underestimate of how many cars Tesla's going to produce in 2022. I think in 2021, it's likely that Tesla's going to come close to 1.5 million vehicles, certainly more than a million. With the growth of Berlin and Austin and the development of Cybertruck, I think it's likely that Tesla's going to exceed 2 million vehicles in 2022. But that's the number I came up with for this particular forecast, this particular model. The other models are going to have more vehicles. And I'm not including Semi in that count. So looking at the revenue numbers, the big drivers, of course, are Model 3 and Model Y. They add up to $70 billion in revenue. Semi is $4.5 billion in revenue. Cybertruck works out to about $9 billion in revenue. Model S, X, and Roadster add up to around $7 or $8 billion in revenue. Powerwall works out to $4 billion. PowerPack works out to $3 billion. Megapack works out to $9 billion. Solar, figuring $40,000 a home, again a rough guess, that works out to $8 billion. And then other revenue, I just used the $5 billion number I talked about before. That added up to $120 billion in revenue. This is at the low end of the projections you're going to see here. And what did I leave out? I left out the revenue from full self-driving. Currently, some percentage of Tesla vehicles adopt full self-driving feature at a cost of around $8,000 a vehicle. Going forward, I think it's likely that's going to change, and that's going to be in later models. And I don't include any robotaxi revenue in this particular model. That's coming at the end. I'm also ignoring leasing versus sales with the cars. Leasing is a fairly low volume of Tesla sales. Most of their vehicle deliveries are actual sales. So it's easier to just count them as sales than worry about the leasing versus sales component. Is that the right decision? I don't know. I'm trying to make a simple model, so this is what I did. For model number 2, I eliminated PowerPack based on Elon's comment that PowerPack is out of date. I don't know if PowerPack's really completely going away or they're going to come up with a new model, but for the sake of simplicity, frankly, I just eliminated PowerPack. It made it easier. I reduced Semi a little bit to 20,000 instead of 25,000. I kept Megapack, Powerwall, and Solar the same. And I took the extra batteries and I put them into Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck. This approach shifts more of the gigawatts into Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck, which are going to be the 3 volume models of the future until the next model comes out. It works out to about, between Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck, that works out to 120 or so of the 200 gigawatt hours that Tesla is using in 2022 in this model. Megapack and Powerwall together use 42 gigawatt hours. Semi is cut down to 20 gigawatt hours. And SX and Roadster stay the same at about 10 gigawatt hours. And again, it adds up to a total of about 200 gigawatt hours. You can go through the math, but because this increases Model Y, Model 3, and because this increases Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck, which are higher revenue per kilowatt hour than the grid storage and Semi, that increases the total revenue to 125 billion. That's the basic shift. The more of the high value per kilowatt hour products you produce, the greater the revenue you're going to see. So by shifting revenue away from lower dollars per kilowatt hour to higher dollars per kilowatt hour, you get higher revenue. Obviously, you'd love to increase Roadster, which is the highest dollars per kilowatt hour, but the volume for Roadster just isn't going to be there. Same thing with Model S and Model X. They're great vehicles. They're just never going to sell in the volume to be the drivers for this company. So that fairly small shift drives revenue up to $125 billion. So we're making some progress in getting a sense of where Tesla might be. We're going to go up and we're going to go down. Let's look at the next model. Now with Model 3, I reduced Solar and Powerwall. And I should be clear here. Solar and Powerwall, because they're connected in the way I've done this model, they are actually a high value for a kilowatt hour because of the value. If you assume they're connected, you end up with a higher revenue per kilowatt hour for Solar and Powerwall together than you get for most of the vehicles. Here I again increased Semi back to 25,000, which is a lower revenue per kilowatt hour approach. And I increased Cybertruck slightly and I reduced Roadster because I'm not convinced that Roadster is going to be sold in very high volume. I reduced Roadster down to 2,000 units, which Roadster being the highest dollars per kilowatt hour is going to have some effect on the total. But again, it's small because it's a low volume item. I kept Megapack at 10,000 units. I'm just winging it on that. With this approach, Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck are still they're still using a lot of gigawatt hours and they're still generating a lot of revenue. But Solar and Powerwall have lost some revenue, and that shifted to some extent to Semi, which is a lower revenue item on a per kilowatt hour basis. This model brings us to $120 billion in revenue, close to $121 billion in revenue. So we're back down a little bit towards where the first model was. In this model, I'm still not accounting for full self-driving, increasing revenue, and I'm still not accounting for Robotaxi revenue. So let's turn to the fourth model. For the fourth model, I'm again leaving out Robotaxi and full self-driving, but I just pushed it. Let's see if we can push vehicle production higher, the passenger car vehicle. So I reduced Semi to only 8,000 units. I don't think it's crazy to think it's going to take time to scale up Semi production and delivery and drive consumption. So taking Semi down to 8,000, I don't think that's crazy. I took Powerwall down even further, which actually hurts revenue overall. If I tweak this differently, it might be better. I kept Roadster low, but I increased Model 3 and Model Y to 900,000 units of Model 3 and 1.2 million units of Model Y. This is aggressive, and it leads to Tesla producing 2.4 million vehicles in 2022. I'm probably stretching here, but I don't think it's crazy. Now in this model, Tesla Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck together are over 150 gigawatt hours of the battery production. Megapack I left the same. Powerwall is reduced. Semi is greatly reduced. Roadster is even more trivial than it was before. This approach pushes revenue up to $129 billion. This is the highest number we've seen of the four models so far. And the revenue here is driven largely by Model 3, Model Y, and to some extent Cybertruck. I didn't do another model, but if I tweak this again, and I said, you know what, let's tweak it and make let's make Powerwall big again and take a little bit away from one of the regular vehicles, that actually would juice revenue more and we'd probably get over 130 billion. So I want to build on that fourth model. The fourth model is the optimistic model. That's the big bull case for where Tesla might be in 2022. And now I want to add to that full self-driving. Let's assume half of the buyers of those vehicles add full self-driving. And let's assume, this is just to be simple, that full self-driving costs $10,000. So it works out to $5,000 a vehicle increase in the sale price. This increases the revenue per kilowatt hour of the vehicles, which I'm not really going to get into here, but more importantly, it increases revenue. And with 2.4 million vehicles, adding $5,000 a vehicle adds a lot of revenue. This brings the total up to $141 billion in revenue. Really, you round up, it brings it up to $142 billion in revenue. This is a pretty big number when you consider we're going back to 2019 and 2020, and we're looking at $25 billion in revenue. We're starting to approach a 6x level of revenue. The revenue for Tesla increasing 6 times in 2 or 3 years. Pretty amazing. I know it's optimistic. I think they can get there. And the last thing I wanted to do was to add in the prospect of Robotaxi revenue in 2022. I think it's likely that Robotaxi will start sometime in 2022. I know some people say a Robotaxi is not going to happen. This is not going to be a big driver of numbers for Tesla in 2022 because the Robotaxi volume will be small. For my analysis, I assumed that Tesla has 50,000 vehicles of its own, that it's taken Model 3s off lease or Model Ys off lease, and rather than selling them to people as used vehicles, they kept them and they're running them as Tesla's own custom Robotaxis, something Elon said that they would do a couple of times. He mentioned it on Autonomy Day very clearly. So 50,000 vehicles in Tesla's fleet, driving 100,000 miles a year, charging $1 a mile, figuring that they only get revenue for 50% of the miles. It works out to $50,000 in revenue per vehicle. On top of that, I added in vehicles owned by Tesla owners, people who bought the vehicles and decide they want to put their vehicles into the Robotaxi network. Now here, I assume people aren't going to send their vehicles out as much, and Tesla's going to get less revenue per mile because they have to share the revenue with the owner. So I figured these vehicles would drive 50,000 miles a year, and Tesla's only going to get 15 cents a mile on that Tesla's only going to get 15 cents a mile of revenue on that on those vehicles that are added by owners to the network, instead of 50 cents a mile for ones that Tesla owns. Add that up, that adds up to $3 billion in revenue, or $3.25 billion in revenue for 2022. It doesn't move the needle a lot, but it pushes Tesla up to $145 billion in total revenue for 2022. This Robotaxi revenue is going to come into play much bigger as we go down the years. As the fleet grows, as the number of vehicles coming in grows, you're going to see that number grow in 2023 and 2024. But for this video, I'm just doing 2022, just to give you a taste of where we're going. Now, what this means for share price is, if Tesla's revenue goes up more than 5x, number one, it shows a very strongly growing company. Really, it's close to 6x on these numbers. Then we should expect that Tesla's share price will go up in the ballpark of 5x. So if Tesla's share price right now is around $400, last I checked it was around $440, it's reasonable to think by the end of 2022, we're going to see a Tesla share price of $2,000 a share. This is post-split, not pre-split. People keep asking me, are my numbers pre-split or post-split? I'm making this video after the split. It's post-split. We're looking at a Tesla share price at the end of 2022 of $2,000 a share or more. Next week, I'm going to make more videos along these lines. I'm going to do 2023, 2024, and probably 2025. Similar spreadsheets, similar models. I'm going to see what kind of feedback I get on this one, and I might adjust my models a little bit based on the feedback. But I think you can see where we're going. If Tesla's going to increase their production from 100 gigawatt hours in 2022 to 3 terawatt hours in 2030, then Tesla's battery production is going to increase a lot over the next few years, 50%, ballpark 50% a year. And the outside suppliers, CATL, LG Chem, Panasonic, and whoever else, their battery supply is also going to increase. And this is going to dramatically increase Tesla's revenue. We're going to see some really big numbers coming forward. So stay tuned for the next in the series. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters for helping with this. And I'd like to ask you, hey, if you like this video, check out these other videos and check back, because the following videos in this series are going to be in the description below when I'm done. But check out the videos here. Check out my merchandise. It should be down below. Please support me on Patreon. And thanks very much for watching.